Morena, everyone. I'm Fiona Levin from Wastemans, and I'm going to get things started this morning with a karakia before we head into the Repair Summit. Tu taua mai I runga, tu taua mai I raro, tu taua mai I roto, tu taua mai I waho. Kia tau au te Māori tū, te Māori ora ki te katoa, humie, huie, taikie. Thank you all for joining us this morning for the Repair Summit. I'm going to pass things off straight away to Brigitte because we've got a lot to get through today. But just to introduce our lovely facilitator for those of you who are not aware, Brigitte Sistig is the founder of Repair Network Aotearoa. She is a creative and committed grassroots community leader who enjoys working collaboratively and networking collectively. Her vision of the RNA ecosystem engendered a solid foundation across multiple sectors in New Zealand and the international right to repair movement. Brigitte actively works towards enabling communities, businesses and government to co-create a repair culture in Aotearoa. So thank you for bringing us all together today. We really appreciate it, and I'll pass it over to you.
Oh, kia ora, Fiona. Thank you very much and welcome everyone. It's lovely to see you here and thank you so much for making time today. So this is our 4th Repair Summit, always close to the International Repair Day, which is in fact this year, this Saturday on the 19th of October. So we're delighted to share with you the work that has been developing this year in Aotearoa in the main sectors that form the 5 pillars of Repair Network Aotearoa. And these are community repair, which is strong with our over 75 repair cafes associated with RNA, collaboration with local authorities, right repair campaigning, repair education, and repair businesses. So all contributing to a thriving repair economy and building a strong repair culture in New Zealand, which is our mission. So today we are fortunate to have key representatives of each of these areas offering a snapshot of their amazing work. We have 4 presenters who each will be speaking for about 10 minutes, followed by a brief Q&A. So please, you can put your Q&A, use the Q&A function to put in your questions. Thank you. So we will attend to as many questions as possible during the session, and any unanswered questions will be collated. And the summary of all the Q&A will be emailed to everyone who registered to the session. So now, without further ado, I would like to welcome Dr. Paul Smith, former head of testing with Consumer New Zealand and now an independent consultant at iFix First. Kia ora, Paul.
Kia ora. Thank you, Brigitte. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Right to Repair Coalition Aotearoa that I'm part of, and give you a little bit of a background to Right to Repair and what it means and where it came from. So the Right to Repair Coalition Aotearoa formed a few years ago. We're a diverse group of people with backgrounds in waste, law and practical community repair. And our goal is to generate support for a right to repair in New Zealand. Can you flick it on, please, Fiona? Thank you. So the goal of Right to Repair is really simple. It's all about choice. So we can do what we want with the products that we own. And that means we should be able to choose to repair them if they become faulty or a part of them wears out. But we find increasingly manufacturers try to prevent us from doing this. So the Right to Repair is really a grassroots response to it, to manufacturers that aren't making repairing stuff easy. And it calls for some practical improvements to make repair cheaper and easier, because if repair is cheaper and easier, it'll happen more often. Let's move it on again, please. So why do we need it? So here's a really, really brief potted history of planned obsolescence that could take hours, but I'll try and cram it into about a minute. So planned obsolescence is the idea that products have a finite life and that life can be manipulated, which usually in this context means it can be shortened. Back in 1924, light bulb manufacturers colluded to reduce the life of the bulbs they made. And in less than a decade, they were really successful. They'd halved the life of light bulbs they manufactured. Why did they do this? Well, they're rewarded by manufacturing products more efficiently and then selling more of them. So efficiently manufacturing products that wear out faster means more sales, more revenue, more profit. Why wouldn't you do it? Let's move it on again. That's a really blunt approach, and you'd think we'd see through it quite quickly. So along with this, planned obsolescence has a psychological side as well. And that was really obvious by about the 1950s, when the US auto industry in particular really embraced it. Manufacturers started releasing cars with a fresh style and aesthetic every year. New models weren't functionally better. They were marketed to make your current car seem out of date or unfashionable. And this should be setting off light bulbs in people's heads, because it's a practice we see absolutely everywhere today. Let's move on again. A recent investigation I did at Consumer New Zealand demonstrated where this super efficient manufacturing system's got us to. I found out what commonly happens to faulty products that get returned under warranty. So I returned food mixes with a simple fault back to the store. In each case, I was given a replacement new product, and as a customer, I walked away happy. But each mixer had a GPS tracker installed in it. Of 4 mixers, 2 of them went to a landfill within days of being returned. 1 of them got sent for recycling, and 1 was sent to a third-party business who refurbished and resold it, which was brilliant. But all of them could easily have been fixed and resold. But providing support for that repair costs money, which reduces the profit, so repair and resale becomes the exception in the system. Let's move on again. So what does right to repair call for? How does it plan to change this almost a century of efficient manufacture and reducing repair? Well, it aims to make repair cheap and easy, and there are a few ways to do that. Some of the things you need are, firstly, repair information. The first task for anybody who wants to repair something is knowing that it can be repaired and how to tackle it. You then need replacement parts, because if you can't replace broken parts or parts that have worn out, then repair is quite often impossible. Repair is really labor intensive. So making products easier to take apart and put back together again is really important. And often we find making a product easy to manufacture means it isn't easy to take apart again. It's easy to put glue on 2 parts and stick them together. It's not so easy to take them apart to repair something. And finally, once a product's repaired, there shouldn't be any reasons why it doesn't function perfectly again. But we find there are reasons, and software is commonly used to limit the function of repaired products. A great example is Apple. If you don't use an authorized screen, some of the physical identification, the Face ID stuff might not work. So why can't we rely on manufacturers doing this voluntarily? Well, it's not profitable for them, but some of them will. A few of them, such as Cactus, make durable and repairable products a core part of their business. So they show that it really can be done. But most of them, and in particular the bigger manufacturers, don't. In the US, John Deere, the agricultural machinery manufacturer, unwittingly kickstarted the entire right to repair movement by preventing farmers from fixing their own equipment. When they went wrong in the field, they had to call a John Deere agent to fix them. And they meant that they lost a lot of production time. And John Deere today continue to lock out repair by using software that prevents the equipment functioning correctly unless one of their authorized agents comes to reset it. It's created a lot of anger. So it's going to take legislation to force widespread change. Overseas, we've seen a lot of progress in the last few years in many US states, in Europe and in Australia, to name a few. The US states started with New York a couple of years ago. It wasn't great legislation, but since then we've seen Minnesota, California, Oregon, and a few more add legislation, and each one improves on the last law. So by iteration, we're getting there. In Europe, eco-design rules apply to specific products, and those are a bit different because they actually specify how you design for repair, and the UK have adopted some of those as well. Australia, a few years ago, passed comprehensive repair legislation for motor vehicles, requiring anything that you can do at a main dealer to also be accessible for independent repairers. Overall, what these things do is they extend existing repair to independent repairers. They sometimes specify design standards. They all allow you to, or force the manufacturer to share parts, tools, software, and documentation, either free or at reasonable prices. Most of them are product specific. So they apply to electronics, appliances, motor vehicles, big things that could be repairable and have seen a lot of pain because they're not repairable. They require replacement parts, not assemblies, to keep the cost down. They allow you to use unauthorized parts, so you can scavenge parts from different products and mash them together, or buy a cheaper part from someone who isn't the official manufacturer. And they limit these use of things like software that prevents repair happening. So what have we done here? Well, up until this year, absolutely nothing. And we still haven't really. We've got no legislation that forces anybody to make repair a thing. But in April, we've got an opportunity. We had an opportunity to start the conversation, a legislative conversation on repair. The Greens put forward a members' bill into the ballot, which got drawn in April. And this is called the Consumer Guarantees Right to Repair Amendment Bill. And it would amend our Consumer Guarantees Act that applies to every product sold to a consumer in New Zealand. It's due for the first reading this year. And if it gets enough cross-party support, it goes to select committee, which means it's a process that takes about 6 months, and repair actually gets debated in Parliament. The bill's quite different to what's happened overseas because it amends our consumer law. It applies to every product a consumer buys. So unlike overseas legislation, it won't just apply to electrical products and cars. It will apply to those, but it would also apply to clothing and furniture and absolutely everything else. And rather than just extend existing repair beyond authorized networks, the legislation implies that every product will need to become more repairable, even if they're not repairable now, which is sort of like the holy grail of right to repair. It's not just saying, make it easier to repair stuff that can already be repaired. It's saying, make stuff repairable. Now, some of that might not feel practical and it feels like we're really taking a leap, but that's why it needs to go to debate to improve it. And this is just the start of our journey, and we've started in a really powerful place. The US state bills have got nearly unanimous support from Democrats and Republicans. So that shows the right to repair doesn't need to be a political issue. It's a rights issue. It's giving back our right to care for the stuff that we own. We need to show government there's a real demand for change. The first reading for this bill is due in the next month or two. And I would urge everyone who cares to contact their local MP, especially if they're National New Zealand First or ACT MPs, because they're the ones that we really need to support this to get it through its first reading. We've got more information about what the bill would do and how you can support the bill at the link that's actually a couple of slides back. If I'd have thought about that, I'd have put it on the end slide, right? So we've got a chance. We've got a chance for really progressing where we are with repair. And it's really, I think, up to us to make this happen now. That's me.
Fabulous, Paul. That's fantastic. Great summary and very motivational as well. So this is time for action here in Aotearoa. And as you mentioned, you can go onto the www.repairnetworkaotearoa.org.nz website, which we'll put into the chat. And there is a whole page on the bill and what you can do to support the bill. Now, I'm just wondering about some questions that may have come up for some people. At the moment, I cannot see anything in the Q&A little box. So maybe I'll just kick it off by asking you, you talked about data security locks, and that's something that occurs more and more. And so I just wonder if you would be able to talk to us a little bit about, when I am sort of researching a product that I'd like to buy, where do I have to look to find out if this product actually has a security lock, and is this registered somewhere?
Yeah, one of the problems we've got is it's really hard to tell which products are more repairable when you're buying them. That's a real issue, right? How do you know what's repairable and what isn't? And usually you only find out when something breaks and it can't be repaired. There's no easy way to solve that without doing a whole load of research yourself. But really it comes down to, at the moment, if you're going to do some research, you can go onto the manufacturer's website and just see if they mention repair, if they have parts, if they have troubleshooting, helplines, help guides. I've just been doing some research recently looking at appliances and finding actually on the New Zealand websites, a lot of them aren't supported. If I go to the UK website where there's right to repair legislation, I can buy parts, I can get troubleshooting help, I can get a whole load of stuff. So a little bit of research, particularly for bigger purchases, would really help. But yeah, there's no easy way, unfortunately. What it'd be great to see is some form of repairability label or score or something on a product that says this one's more repairable than that one. So then you can make the choice. But at the moment, it's really on us as consumers to do our own research. It's not great.
Great answer. Thank you so much. Very informative. And just would you want to talk a little bit about the bill, perhaps? The pros and cons, just in a nutshell.
Yeah, I guess the pros for me are two of the things it does. The pros for me are that it is really wide ranging. It applies for everything that a consumer might buy, and you could see that as a pro or a con. The pro is it applies to everything. The con is perhaps some of that is not the most workable, in that I could buy a pencil and the bill says it has to be repairable. I don't know how you'd repair a pencil, but it's a bad example. But anyway, but that it applies to everything. One of the issues we have with the Consumer Guarantees Act is it's not very well enforced. It relies on individuals to enforce it themselves. So if I've got a problem, I need to go back to the store and argue my case. So if I want to repair something, I have to individually argue that I want to repair it because the law says so. And I've got to battle the manufacturer and the retailer who probably don't want to repair it for me. So one of the issues is enforcement, and that's one of the things that needs to be corrected. That's something that is seen overseas, that all of these this legislation has really strong enforcement. In fact, Australia have just fined Honda for not complying with their motor manufacturer's right to repair bill. They've not been sharing information. So the ACCC over there have actually pinged them with quite a fine. So we need that sort of thing as well. It's about the breadth of what it does, how realistic that is, and then making sure that people are actually complying with it.
Excellent. Thank you, Paul. This is great. This is probably the time we have for this particular Q&A. And as I mentioned, you can go to our website. There's a specific sub-page on right to repair, which also gives you some tips on how to speak to your local MP. So this was one of the questions in the Q&A. So thank you, Paul, again. And now it's my absolute pleasure to introduce our youngest presenter, Jessica Saul, who works at the University of Canterbury as the Engagement and Learning Librarian. So over to you, Jessica, please.
Excellent. Well, kia ora tātou. Kia ora tātou. Ko Jessica tapunga. Hi all, my name is Jessica. We've already worked in the University of Canterbury Libraries. Specifically, I'm a subject specialist for the Makerspace. We've had a Makerspace since 2016, and myself and a colleague, as well as our whole library team, have been working on building the community around it since 2021 in that sort of post-COVID times. So what's a Makerspace? I'll go into depth later in the talk, but briefly, it's a recreational space that specialises in crafting, repair and well-being that unites people across disciplines, where users can take ownership of their learning. For example, learning how to 3D print or sew, which is excellent for repair. We support their training and the wider well-being of the UC community. Today, I'll be speaking about the role of university libraries in increasing access to information, equipment, and support around repair in the community. Next slide. Excellent. So who are we? So the University of Canterbury Libraries, the specific service of the Aotearoa Makerspace. We're filled with University of Canterbury students and staff, student groups, UC departments, specialist staff and volunteers. And we serve a community of approximately 27,000 people. Next slide. So why are we getting involved? Well, thanks, Paul, for talking about right to repair. So there's a huge increasing interest in the right to repair as well as making. Our new generation of students are increasingly interested and invested in sustainability and repair. There's lots more making and repair content online, so think TikToks and YouTube videos and instructional resources that are getting more traction. And there's an increasing interest in the skill set to restore, repair, upcycle, and the desire to disengage from the constant need to buy. So how that looks is things like clothing swaps are getting more common. And we're in this space of building a community that has more repair skills and is more resilient in adversity. So we're still on the other slide. Thank you. So however, there's barriers to face with this. Things like actually having access to equipment, skilled support. So many people don't have parents, grandparents, friends that have skill set in repair to teach them, or have the know-how to teach them with advanced technologies for these repairs and skill sets. Actually having dedicated space, so to explore the skill sets, to support those skills gaining, and the increase in the personal and community skill set is sometimes a lack of skills in the community to support, or that lack of knowledge to know how to fix something, or that it actually can be. As well as the cost of the equipment, supplies, or skills classes to gain that skill set. So it's actually paying off, right? So we've seen a marked increase in visits and increasing engagement in both making and repair in the past 3 years, in line with that increased activation of the space. For example, this is what one of our students said: I can take this to the makerspace and fix it. And repair skills give people a reason to participate. So if you ever look at the stats there, we've increased from, in 2022, 500 visits a month, all the way up to now we have 3,400 visits a month on average this year. That's so in the uni year, which is February to November, that's equivalent to 27,000 visits. So if you consider from our previous slide, 27,000 visits, that's equivalent to a visit from every single member of our community. What a win. Okay, we're good for the next slide now. So this one is how makerspace actually fit into libraries and their communities. So just how you'd access knowledge through books, and how like a library staff might help you access an online resource, an audio guide, any of these types of resources. Makerspaces are that space to help transfer that knowledge around making, how to access those resources, but also increase access to the equipment and supplies to be able to do that. And we encourage the ownership and active role of growth in the abilities of our community and their resilience. Next slide. So the makerspace itself, so we're a recreational space to create, craft and dream. So that means that one of the things is that we don't have the graded coursework in our space. What this does is mean that it equalizes the space across all the members in our community, instead of someone being enrolled in a specific course of study. All of those courses of study have spaces with the correct support already. So we're trying to create a safe, supportive environment for the community to explore, create and repair, promoting the gain in confidence, ability and skills. We provide safe space, equipment and skilled support. So in terms of actual equipment, we have full 3D printing station with 3D scanning, so we can scan in broken parts. We have full sewing station with industrial sewing, overlocker, 6-needle embroidery machine. We have ability to print on garments and print stickers. We have plentiful crafting, art supplies and tools. And we also have other things like our music creation and editing software, board games and video games. And yeah, so that's cool. And we have capacity for 38 people at a time. yeah, that's really cool. We facilitate collaborations. So they're between things like student groups, UC departments, and users of our space actually hosting stuff. And how we build these relationships. So say with our student clubs, we attend their training day and support them to host events in our space and to create resources and merch and things like that throughout the year. We also support staff groups with team building and wellbeing sessions, which filter out into the wider community with those staff members organising events for students and staff alike. And we use a lot of word of mouth sharing as well as direct communication and relationship building. And we facilitate the skills acquisition. So we host things like induction classes every single week. We have, at the moment, 15 appointment times every week. We help host or primary host group sessions, and we've been creating online video resources and guides for all of the equipment. In the makerspace, we actually have a dual purpose or goal. So sharing and supporting the gain of these practical knowledges, but also building well-being, so that sort of community around it. So we're around building strong, interconnected, supportive community because we believe it plays a key role in the resilience of everybody in the community. There's also a huge benefit to well-being from working with your hands. So in that repair place, actually making stuff helps the well-being, and by boosting the ability of the community to repair, upcycle, and repurpose collectively and independently gives a higher level of resilience in the face of adversity. For example, in COVID, all of the people making masks, videos about how they're doing it, supplying different people, and sharing these skill sets helped our wider community's well-being in the time of crisis. Next slide. So here's an example of our events that we do. So we host a UC Repair Cafe, and it's growing in demand. So when we first hosted it, we did it once in the year, in collaboration with Repair Revolution and UC Sustainability. And now this year we've hosted 3 more events where we now just host with UC Sustainability. And we build on their strength to advertise and bring in a wider variety of volunteers and people to the events, and our strengths in the library team to upskill, skill share, and give access to equipment and resources. We also have things like pre-event skills classes for volunteers or people that want to get involved, so that they can upskill and support others in the sessions. And the types of things that we're helping people repair, things like darning and patching things, gluing stuff back together, general clothing and textile repairs like hemming pants. We've had quite a few jewellery repairs lately, shoe repair and gluing, and industrial sewing for more heavy-duty items, leather item repair and being able to punch new holes into belts, things like that. And ability to have some tools and equipment for the eyeglasses repair, like the tiny, tiny screws. And a whole bunch of things like iron-on patches and puffer patches for ease of repair. And we also supply that you can see in the picture on the screen, a dedicated repair station that's available all of our open hours. And in terms of our stats, we've diverted more than a ton of items that would have gone to landfill back into usage, and that's just the stats from our repair cafes and not from just our general usage of people fixing things day in, day out. So the repair cafes actually give opportunity for our community to start to engage in our library spaces, and it's a way of building that practical skill set towards resilience of the community. And repair cafes are a great way to start skills acquisition. Right, next slide. So what's next? Right, because we've got this growing interest in more frequent repair cafe times. So next year, more repair cafe opportunities. Increasing the activation of our existing equipment. So that's like creating our digital resource for our power tools induction, so that people can do that online rather than needing to come to a specific induction time. Increasing staff training and opportunities to support. So that includes opportunities for volunteers and increasing collaboration with other makerspaces in Canterbury, New Zealand, and abroad. Thank you. Yeah, that's the last one.
Oh, fabulous. Thank you so much, Jessica. That is so inspiring. You certainly are a forwarder in the tertiary education sector, you know, to introduce repair to such a large number of people. And when we spoke, you know, you also said it's becoming part of the culture of the university. This is what students are offered to. And then this just becomes the norm, right? So I'm just super impressed. And it's great to see you, you know, have this opportunity to share this today. So for more people to learn about, you know, your incredible mahi. Fabulous.
Yeah, thank you.
So I've just wondered, you know, what are some of the support systems, you know, within the university you have been able to access, you know, to have such success? Mm.
So the strongest thing for us is collaboration. So collaboration is where the makerspace shines. So things like collaborating with the wellbeing team, the university department that supports the students like mental wellness and stuff like that, because those collaborations they bring in a lot of people and start getting people in line. So, for example, talking with I've gone and talked with the counsellors on campus and taken some of the resources that they have higher awareness so that they know they can send students to the makerspace for more general community time. And then we have things like UC sustainability. Little shout out to Chloe because she's really been very, very supportive in those collaborations for the repair cafes, as well as some of the other UC departments. And also a lot of our library users actually getting involved in the space and going, hey, can I help with that? And it started our journey for creating resourcing and support for volunteers.
Fabulous. There's one question in the Q&A, and it just asked about the number of staff that are involved in
Excellent.
your project.
So I'm part of the learning and engagement team, and there's 31 members on our team. But how that looks on a regular day is that there are library shifts inside of the makerspace. So we have 2 formalized shifts at lunch and in the evening time for all the people of that team to support the makerspace, as well as specific projects and support. However, there are 2 main staff that's full-time supporting the makerspace and things like planning, our health and safety, our induction times, and providing appointment times for the students and staff alike.
Fabulous. I think it's brilliant. And obviously, I think everyone is feeling super inspired by your work. Thank you so much for sharing with us today. Yeah, I would like now to go to the next speaker, our council champion, introducing repair cafes in a resourceful, supportive and empowering way to the community. So please welcome Meghan Cooper, Waste Minimisation Officer with Rotorua Lakes Council. Kia ora, Meghan.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you for having me here today. I'm just going to speak a little bit on our experience of launching a repair cafe in Rotorua from the perspective of a council, and I guess also sort of highlighting potential involvement of councils in this space. I'm just noting that different councils will operate differently and will have different resourcing in this area, but there will be some commonalities which I think provide good opportunities for this. So just go to the next slide, please. So I think it's pretty safe to say that most or all councils will have an interest in reducing waste to landfill. Another thing that all councils will have is a waste management and minimisation plan, which will include that as one of their targets. And those plans are based on a waste assessment of what's being sent to landfill from the district and identification of opportunities to reduce that. There'll also be a lot of roles within council that have interest in collaboration with other agencies and groups and community initiatives that are being started or being trialled or already in operation. So there's kind of a few potential entry points, I guess, from a council point of view to this kind of thing. For us in particular, our interest in Repair Cafe was triggered by an assessment of what was being thrown away as part of illegal dumping. So we did some surveying over a summer period and went to some illegal dumping sites, and we're trying to figure out what were the trigger materials that were potentially leading someone to make a decision to dump rubbish rather than just using curbside services and other things. And for us at the time, it was that a lot of the stuff we were seeing was clothing that either was excess or maybe just with minor damage, furniture with maybe like runners broken in the drawers and things like that, you know, things that potentially could have been repaired and not dumped. You can see in that photo I've got to the side, there's a bike in there, and it's quite common. We see items like that dumped. So yeah, lots of opportunities for council interest. It just kind of depends on what the priorities are within the waste management minimisation plans and what the resourcing is like within the council. Next slide, please. So for our initiative, we had a couple of agencies that we were able to partner with. So we partnered with EnviroHub in Rotorua and DIY Shed, who do workshops and community initiatives on teaching people design and build skills, repurposing of stuff, fixing furniture and all that kind of thing. We did connect up with Repair Cafe Aotearoa New Zealand for a lot of support. So when we were looking into this, the guideline kit that's provided was being developed. So it was all kind of like all these things all coming together at once, which was great. We funded the pilot through our waste minimisation budget, and that's funds that come from the Ministry for Environment through the waste levy. So everybody who sends stuff to landfill, whether it be through your curbside services or to directly to a landfill drop-off site, there'll be a levy, a fee that you pay for that service, and some of that money comes back to councils to spend on waste minimisation activity. So that's what we funded this through. And that funding is linked very closely to the waste management and minimisation plans that councils have. So those plans basically explain and liaise with the community about how those funds are going to be spent. When we launched the pilot in Rotorua, we had the intent from the start to really just launch it. It was not really our plan to run the Repair Cafe in the long term, mainly because I think the concept of Repair Cafe sits better in a community base. And when you are more based in a community, you're a little bit more free from kind of council priorities and council directions. You know, there can be a lot of change in annual plans and use of council funds. And if you have something that's more community based and driven by volunteers within the community, you can have a little bit more stability and resourcing for it. So our intent was to launch it, explore what the interest was like in the area, and see if we could get some volunteers together, and then a handover. That was kind of our plan from the start. I think there's quite a few benefits, I think, from our experience of being involved at a council point of view, and also having EnviroHub as one of our key partners. One of the key benefits was that we were able to do all the coordination activity and the setup stuff and the exploration, that kind of thing, in a BAU role. So it was a part of our paid work activity. When you have an initiative that's being run by volunteers, as probably many of you will be aware, volunteers tend to be very generous people with their time. A lot of them will work or have family commitments or volunteer for other things. So they'll be trying to do the establishment activity around all those other commitments. But to be able to have a little bit of time where your kind of paid focus is on starting this activity, I think that was a real benefit from this approach. The other thing with it too is that councils often have venues. So they might have different sort of historic buildings or halls or access to things like that, which we can often book at cheaper rates, or have just a bit easier access to. We have funds like the funds through the waste minimisation levy funding provide us opportunity to kind of thank our volunteers and offer them incentives for being involved. Even though with volunteers you often don't have to offer incentives because they're usually passionate about what they do, but provided a bit of resourcing, I guess, for that kind of thing. Another benefit is that councils tend to have quite a wide audience reach, in that we have like social media channels and stuff like that people follow for updates on roading, services, plans and strategies that come out in consultation. So you have a very diverse reach, rather than, if you sort of set up a targeted activity plan or targeted activity page, you'll get people that are interested in that activity. With the kind of a wide council reach, you'll get those people, but then you'll also get others who would not necessarily have engaged otherwise. The association to a council can be a positive. It can be also a potential issue, in that not everybody likes councils and what they do. So, but I think with an initiative like Repair Cafe, there's just a general, people are appreciative of the service, they're appreciative of the availability of the opportunity. So I think in this context, it's not really an issue. Next, our key learning for us was we spent quite a lot of our time looking at the paperwork process, because we were approaching it from being in a paid role where we had paid time to invest in it. We didn't want to set it up so that any volunteers that we then handed it into had to sustain or maintain a kind of the same kind of level of time commitment that we were putting into it at the start. So we spent a lot of time in looking into how we could streamline and kind of set up paperwork processes so that once it was handed over, that aspect was as quick and tidy and easy as it could. So we looked at kind of automation of the registration process and that sort of stuff. We spent quite a bit of time exploring that kind of thing and seeing how we could make it easier for volunteers. We looked a lot into as well the main expenses of this kind of thing, because it then becomes koha based. We again wanted to make sure that when we set it up, we weren't setting it up for a volunteer group to then have to sustain that at a very high level. So we identified that venue is generally the main expense for the activity. And so we explored a couple of different venue types and eventually moved to one that we knew would be of a lower cost and better sort of set up for what was wanted. Another thing that we found quite difficult to navigate around it, I guess it matters. It's a difficult area for somebody like a council to navigate around photo consent and privacy, because you have a lot stronger processes around that kind of thing than some maybe community-based organizations. So we found it difficult to get the consent confirmed within the processes and then identify who in attendance had given consent and who didn't. And we just had to be really careful about that from a council point of view. So we spent quite a bit of time nutting that out. I think when it's a volunteer agency, it's not quite as much of a complication, but for us it really was. The other thing that we learned through it was that the handover process wasn't as straightforward as we potentially thought. So we were kind of like, we'll set it up, we'll get a group organized, and then we'll just hand it over. But it has been a bit more time than expected to do that. And I think when we look back in retrospect, then that's something that we should have planned into it anyway, to sort of say, well, we've been running this is how we've been running it. But a volunteer group who then take it over don't necessarily want to run it in that same way. They want to sort of do it to a way that suits them. And so there's a time that's required in order to transition into those different ways of doing things, or to fine tune things again and to take our learnings and develop it as they want to. Next. So in terms of next steps from our view, we have the Repair Cafe that's continued to being hosted by EnviroHub because it needed to be attached to an organisation for funding things, for venue hire and all that sort of stuff. Council are continuing to support the venue until the cafe can get itself into a kind of more of a position where that's able to be funded. So that's something that councils are probably able to do. We are working towards a paid coordinator role and also looking to diversify. So we have found that we've had a lot of repeat customers. So people who come to one will come to the next with their other items and things like that. Really hoping to get that word out there a bit more. We found our first through events that were run through the council social media platforms and that sort of stuff had really good numbers of registrations that did drop off once we moved that association away. So for the challenge for the cafe group now is just trying to build up that reach again and diversify that audience. So we're not just getting repeat people, we're getting more and more people coming, more and more people talking about the experience of what it was like for them and the things that they were able to get fixed, and sharing that story so that we can get more and more of the community aware of what's going on and what can be fixed there and how to get involved. And I think that is me.
Brilliant. That's fantastic, Megan. I mean, so inspiring. And to see you take this off the ground, with such inspiration and such generosity as well, towards the community, and how beautiful, to see the two, sectors come together, it's a win-win situation, for
I think it's been my favorite project of everything I've worked on. It's just been such a positive, and just people go away just having loved it.
Beautiful. Okay. Thank you again, for being part of this today and leading the sector, right?
Thank you.
Go well. And I would now like to introduce our last speaker. He's from Christchurch, Meghan Cooper from Cactus Outdoor, and he will lead us on the journey of a successful business that designs repairability into their product. Kia ora, Ben.
Kia ora te whānau. So thank you to all the co-presenters today, and thanks for the shout out, Paul. That might possibly be a cactus shirt you're wearing there. I think the thing that really interests me is that I absolutely applaud the stuff that everyone's doing. Jessica at the EUC and Meghan with the council and Paul with this research. And I guess my take and my aspect is around a much harsher sort of commercial perspective on it, but hopefully the narrative there is that repairability and a move towards repairing isn't just the right thing to do, good for people, good for planet, good for all that sort of stuff, but it's actually the right thing to do from a financial perspective as well. So that's kind of I guess what my focus is going to be. So we can jump onto the next slide. Apologies in advance, my slides don't tell anything other than there's some interesting pictures to look at. But a little bit about Cactus for those that don't know it. So Cactus is a manufacturer and a retailer and e-tailer of backpacks and outdoor clothing. We started 32 years ago in Wellington. And the three individuals that you see on the slide in front of you are the three founders about 30 odd years ago, running down a road in Christchurch. We relocated to Christchurch pretty early on in the piece. And if we go on to the next slide, the thing that I guess is quite unique is that these are the same three individuals with significantly less hair and maybe slightly larger waistlines a good 25 years later, essentially running down the same road. And so it's if you put aside, I'm going to talk about repair, don't get me wrong, but if you put aside that side of things, it's really rare for businesses to be built with a view towards the longer term and sort of intergenerationality. And I think that my kind of thesis is that approach towards building a business, while it might sound as very different from building a long-term product, is actually the same thing. It's a kind of a foil to this modern approach towards the world, towards the modern sort of economic construct, towards sort of transactionality. And taking that one step further, if we move on to the next slide, I guess what is particularly, it's particularly moving for me, but I think is an interesting story is that this is myself and my two sons. So when I talk about an intergenerational business, we have the second generation working in the business, and not just myself, one of the other shareholders, his two daughters work in the business as well. And so, I would suggest that as a sort of a Te Ao Māori perspective on business that is not about extracting resource, but rather about putting back into the system, the bigger system, as much as we take out or more than we take out, making things for the long term, and doing so in a way that isn't so extractive, I guess, of people in the planet. So moving on to the next slide, I guess we're an apparel business, and so we make clothing. We have the largest remaining factory in New Zealand, clothing factory in New Zealand. We make for ourselves, but we also make uniforms for police and army and navy and ambulance and all a bunch of these different things. And I think if you see what has happened to the apparel industry in the last 30 odd years since we've been in business, it's actually awful. And so this is obviously a very heartstring kind of tugging image of mountains of clothing waste. But if you look at companies like Shein and Temu and those sorts of organizations, you know, Shein is sending daily container ships of crap, technical term, of clothing from China to the West. And what people might not understand is that a significant proportion of the stuff in those container ships never actually makes it to market. So the business model of these organizations is not just fast fashion, but hyper fast fashion. And so they will have a product development cycle. So normally in the apparel industry, you have seasonal releases. So, you know, summer 24, this is our products for summer 24, and those will stay the same for, you know, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, and then next summer they'll be changed. So these sorts of organizations, their product development cycle is days and weeks. So literally they will have a rotating product development cycle that is incredibly fast. But what that means is that a significant amount of the time, a bunch of stuff that gets sent on a container ship from China to wherever is obsolete by the time it arrives. And so it bypasses the market, it bypasses consumers, it bypasses shops, it goes straight to landfill. And so the fast fashion thing is something that is truly abhorrent from the environmental perspective. And I think what's really important with a lot of these things, I struggle when we blame the vendors. You know, I struggle that we blame, you know, Shein or Hallenstein Glassons or whatever the vendors are, because at the end of the day, we are the market, and it's we that are demanding that they work in that way. So until we stop wanting to be excited about the shiny new thing, we can't blame the companies for delivering the shiny new thing. So if we go on to the next slide, so we at Cactus have a very different model on the world, and so you know, our tagline is gear that wears in, not out, and so we make products that last a ridiculously long time, which is an absolutely abysmal business model. It's a terrible way to run a business, but it's a fantastic way to make clothes, especially if your customers don't particularly like shopping, don't like, you know, aren't fashionable, simply want you know, gear that helps them get their job done. And so we make really, really long-lasting workwear. And to give you a sense of that, we regularly have people come into our retail stores around the country or send us an email or whatever, who are super proud of the fact that they've been wearing a pair of trousers all day, every day for 15 years. And they're tatty and they've got holes in them, but they're only just worn in. So that's kind of our model. And so I guess I mean, who doesn't support the right to repair? You know, that's a logical thing. But I think the first step is not needing repair. And so while, you know, I think makerspaces are amazing and they're so cool and absolutely support the creation of them and you know, people having the right to repair, you know, how about instead of making it possible for people to repair the $25 mixer that they get from Harvey Norman or whatever, how about making it a $50 mixer and it's going to last 1 or 2 generations, because fundamentally that's an even better outcome. And so we can move on to the next slide. If we think about this for us, we engineer into our products, you know, our core DNA is about engineering and crafting products with great longevity. Our stuff lasts in its class longer than anything else. So, you know, you can buy from us you know, an incredibly expensive canvas down jacket that is generally accepted as the longest lasting down jacket in the world. But you can also buy a lightweight synthetic jacket that, you know, it doesn't last as long as this crazy garment, but it lasts much longer than the competitors. And so our primary thing is that we engineer in long-lasting, you know, longevity. But the second part of that is we sell to customers that, you know, pride themselves on absolutely giving their gear a hammering. So the second part of that is that you need to engineer into that, and this is where the repair thing comes in. You need to engineer into that the ability for things to be repaired readily. And so what's happened in our industry, you know, I'm sure everyone on this call owns a waterproof breathable jacket. You know, it rains a lot, you need a jacket that keeps you warm. It's also, it keeps you dry, sorry. It's also warm sometimes. You want it to breathe and the sweat to go out. What's happened in the last 5 or 10 years is that everyone has moved to all seams being welded in those jackets, which is great. They look really good and they're svelte and it's all very nice. Unfortunately, what it means is they can't be repaired. And so when one of those goes wrong, for whatever reason, it gets thrown out. We still do stuff like, so the way we make apparel is similar to the way apparel was made 20, 30, 50, even 100 years ago. What that means is that with a modicum of skill and with pretty standard manufacturing machinery, you can repair stuff. And so I've spent a bit of time in the Himalayas, and I was in the Himalayas a few years ago with my family, and we were in Namche Bazaar. Namche Bazaar is 3,500 meters above sea level. It's the sort of biggest village before you get to Mount Everest. But there's not much look there. There's lots of tea houses, but there's not other things. We had a bag that needed to be fixed, and we could do that really easily. So if we move on to the next slide, and I will wrap this up quickly. The next stage of this for us is really embracing this repair idea. And so we have recently opened this thing called Cactus Lab as a part of our store in Christchurch. People can come, can drop in their gear, can get it repaired, can actually see what repair looks like, can talk with the people that make their stuff. We can go to the next slide. It's just more pictures of what we do. They can talk to the machinists who do their stuff and do their repairs, and really become, much like with the makerspace, can be kind of one with the repair process. So it's much easier for them to understand and be a part of. And so I would really encourage people to think about their consumption. Don't rely upon companies doing the right thing. You do the right thing as a consumer. Part of that is embracing repair, but also getting used to the tools and the processes so you can do your own repair. So that's me. We can move on to my last slide, which is just my contact details, but happy to answer any questions or any thoughts.
Kia ora, thank you very much, Ben. That's fantastic. So inspirational. 30 years you've been involved in this business. And so I think please contact Ben if you're interested, in getting in touch and learning from him, which would be very valuable. And we're also now coming to the end of our presentation and our time together. I'd like to thank you all, for making time to join us in this wonderful movement, which is called Repair Movement Aotearoa. And if you're interested in getting involved, please, just contact us. I'm just going to enter our website here. And we would love to see you. And if you're also interested in maybe getting involved in some way, let us know what you would like to do. That would be fabulous. Thanks again for attending the Repair Summit this year, which is really intended to offer inspiration and motivation, to come together. This is a movement. This is across the sectors. And enjoy the rest of your day. Take care, and we'll hopefully see you soon again. Kia ora.